Hello, world, and welcome to the In My Footsteps podcast. I am Christopher Setterlin, coming to you from the vacation destination known as Cape Cod, Massachusetts, and this is episode 228. We got a stacked show this week to warm you up from the cold that is the dog days of winter. We're going to kick it off with a look back at some of the most famous, infamous, well-remembered daytime infomercial products and services. We're going to go way back in the day and do an overview of the MTV Unplugged series. There's going to be a brand new top 5 as we look at the top 5 companies that went under during the dot-com bubble bursting at the turn of the 21st century. And there'll be a brand new This Week in History and Time Capsule looking back at the very first inductees into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. All of that is coming up right now on episode 228 of the In My Footsteps podcast. Come on in and gather around the fire, warm yourself up to take some of the chill out of winter. Thank you for tuning in to my show, the In My Footsteps podcast, your weekly dose of GenX nostalgia and pop culture. About an hour a week that I try to help those of my age, my generation, escape from the fact that we are getting older every day. Wherever you're listening from, whether it's New England, the rest of the United States, or anywhere around the world, I hope you're having the best day, the best week that you can. As we speak here on Cape Cod, it is freezing cold, maybe 20 degrees with the wind howling, so the wind chill is about 0. Don't worry, there's 2 months left till spring. As I said, we've got a loaded show this week, some stuff that I'm really excited to talk about and share with you. But of course, I can't start the podcast proper off without thanking my Patreon subscribers, Lori, Mary Lou, Ashley, Kevin, Leo, Marguerite, Neglectoid, Crystal, Matt, Dr. Shrimp Porto Chico. Thank you all for being my biggest supporters, my biggest backers, those who literally put their money where their mouth is to support me, my never-ending dream of being a full-time, self-employed content creator, whatever that might mean, podcasts, books, blogs, my burgeoning film career. As of the recording of this podcast, I have just finished the first draft of the script for my film that we're going to be shooting later in the summer, my first feature-length film, my first film in general that I'm producer of. I'm really excited about that. I started getting into the groove as far as script writing. It's a lot different than writing a blog or a book. And hopefully it's the start of things to come, opening a door to somewhere different that I'm going to go, out of my comfort zone for sure. If you would like a shout out during the soliloquy that is the beginning of my podcast, you can do so on Patreon for $5 a month. You get access to bonus podcast episodes like the main one that drops at the beginning of the month where I review a few entries of my old Initial Impressions blog. We are deep into my running life on that now. There's also the new Hidden Track podcast where I do deep dives into topics that I spoke about on this show, but deserved a little more love. There's also the Remastered Without a Map live streams. There's an ever-growing free tier. If you can't part with your hard-earned money, I totally understand. You can always just share all my work. Just make your social media nonstop sharing all my stuff, because God knows I share my stuff enough. Just hit share repeatedly. We can get into more housekeeping stuff at the end of the show. I want to get into the actual podcast because we're going to start it off with a subject that's going to bring back lots of warm and fuzzy memories for my fellow Gen Xers. It'll probably, a lot of these things will remind you of being sick in the 80s and 90s. So enough talk. Well, enough talk at the beginning. Let's kick off episode 228 of the In My Footsteps podcast by looking at daytime infomercial products and services. For this first segment of the podcast, I might be going a little fast and loose with the rules of what exactly an infomercial is. I think of a typical commercial as being something that's 60 seconds or less. There's one quick message, we're in and out. An infomercial is a little different. Your definition of what it is might be different from mine. I think of it as either a commercial that's like 2 minutes long where you really get into that second level of information about a product, or it can be one of those standalone shows where it's all about one product or service. Like I said, these are ones that I remember when I was staying home sick from school in the 80s and 90s. So that's why I said daytime infomercials. They don't have to be ones that you saw during the day. They could have been at midnight. What I've got here are 10 infomercials that I'm sure are going to bring you Gen Xers back to those days. I'm going to say out of all of these, there's going to be at least several. I don't want to speak for you, but there's going to be a lot of these that you're going to immediately know by the name. You're going to either hear the song that went with it, or you're going to see images in your head. The first one I've got here was something that was called the Walk and Roll.
Introducing Walk and Roll from TelExpress. No matter what the time or weather, you can walk to a fitter, trimmer, healthier you. It's so easy. A half-hour workout every other day can burn more calories and tone you up quicker than an all-day hike.
What this looks like is a very low-quality treadmill. It's got this typical treadmill base, but instead of it being a belt that goes around on a loop, there's these little rollers. It looks like if you took a whole bunch of rolling pins and stuck them together and then put a little bit of a belt over them, that's what you've got here. Of course, with this infomercial, it shows just heavy set waists, no faces, someone trying to put their belt on. And this thing guarantees, or at least says if you use it, you will tone up your gut, your butt, your calves. And of course, it's in as little time as possible, 30 minutes. You'll get 300 calories. This thing honestly looks like if you actually tried to use it, it would break. It's also like half as wide as a normal treadmill, so you've got to walk with a really awkward gait just to stay on it. So this came out in the early 90s. I don't know how well it sold, but I do know that it was 3 easy payments of $33. So if we assume that's $100 in 1991, that's about $238 when adjusted for inflation to 2026. You'd have an easier time just buying warm clothing and good shoes and walking outside in the weather. That one I wasn't sure if any of you have heard of before. It was kind of a refresher to me. I kind of vaguely remembered it. This one, though, all of you will remember.
Protect yourself with Life Call and you're never alone. To get complete free information by mail about this affordable medical emergency response system, call toll-free now. Life Call can save your life.
Yes. Do you remember Life Call or Life Alert? It's a necklace, a chain with a little button on it that if you're a senior citizen, if you live alone, if something happens to you, you can press that button. It had the famous line,
"I've fallen and I can't get up."
We're sending help immediately, Mrs. Fletcher.
I've fallen and I can't get up. I remember my friend Hassan and I, when we made our audio shows back in like 1990, 91, we made our own commercial of this where I was dying and I was like, please help. And he's like, press your Life Call. We can't make it. We're stuck in traffic. Sorry. Life Call was such a big part of the infomercial culture of the early 90s. It shows the time that this came out, where they were talking about how it's so much easier to just wear this chain and press this button than to have a bulky cell phone or to have to go get your phone that's on a cord or hanging on the wall. What's interesting is that the Life Call, Life Alert company was sued several times in the early 90s for misleading customers about their quote-unquote special access to 911. According to the prosecutors, the Life Alert system could cost a customer anywhere from $1,700 to $5,000. I don't know if that's true, but it sure seems like this was not the special life-saving product they made it out to be. It sure made for some funny commercials, though, in the early 90s. Speaking of funny products and funny infomercials, do you remember great-looking hair?
Just spray GLH on and it instantly covers your bald spot, leaving you with great-looking hair. And ladies with thinning hair or bald spots, GLH solves the problem instantly. GLH is not a paint or a cover-up. It's an amazing powder that clings to the tiniest hairs on your head.
This is literally like spray on hair. In these infomercials, they show a guy that's bald or balding, and they just spray paint hair back on his head. Like if only it was that easy. This was created by the Ronco company in the late 80s. It was under the name either Great Looking Hair or GLH number 9, so I guess they tried 8 times to make this spray on hair that it failed. This spray either enhanced what you had on your head, making it look thicker and fuller, or it generated something that says hair-like filaments on your head. Even the strongest spray paint can be washed off, so I'm assuming if you've got spray on hair, if you get in the shower enough, it's just going to wash away and you're going to have to just keep buying these cans of spray for the rest of your life. This is one of the ones that I mentioned. This had a 30-minute infomercial. Whereas the Life Call, Life Alert was a 2-minute commercial, Great Looking Hair was 30 minutes of different bald men getting spray paint on their head. I guess this product, the Ronco version, sold 500,000 of these spray cans. If you look at some of the infomercials, go on YouTube, you can see the sign of the times where there's a dude that's balding, but he's got a mullet. If you bought Great Looking Hair in 1992, it cost you $39.92, which is a weird number. That's about $92 when adjusted for inflation for a can of spray-on hair that you know doesn't last long. One thing that you need to last long is a mattress, and a good mattress. Do you remember Craftmatic adjustable beds?
I'm no dummy. I bought a Craftmatic 2 adjustable bed. Be smart. Don't buy any bed until you get this free information by mail about the Craftmatic 2 adjustable bed that costs less than many flat beds. Call toll-free now for free information.
This was one of those that when I was a kid seeing this in the late 80s, it was like a transformer. Like I expected this bed as the top and the bottom went up and it starts creating these angles for better sleeping positions. I thought it was going to just turn into a robot. It's like Craftmaticon, the bed that turns to a robot. The idea behind these is pretty good, where you can change the position of your bed to help you sleep better if you've got sleep apnea or, trouble breathing at night. These are still made to this day. Go to craftmatic.com. You can get yourself an adjustable bed. As far as I can see, these were made starting in the early 80s. I even found a really creepy commercial of the guy that's the spokesman taking pictures of a mother and daughter sitting in this adjustable bed. In these old commercials, you would get a free Polaroid camera, and the claim was always that the adjustable bed cost the same as regular flat beds. You would get all these testimonials of different couples and how the adjustable bed changed their lives. These would be 2 to 3 minute commercials. So if we were at home sick in the 80s, early 90s, you had to just sit and watch the bed just go up and down. And of course, it can't be cheap because none of these commercials would have any prices in it. It would just be call and get your catalog. One of my favorite infomercials growing up was the Flowbee.
I get a perfect haircut every time with my Flowbee.
Save time and money with a Flowbee.
Simply connect the Flowbee to your vacuum, while the internal blades cut only the amount of hair that you set the adjustable spacers to.
Hey, I'm Jimmy. I'm Mike, and this is Bacon Is My Podcast. Yes, it's as serious as it sounds.
If you're tired of podcasts that feel like job interviews,
we fix that.
On What's Your Bacon in 7 questions, we ask guests 7 questions that somehow lead to great stories, questionable decisions,
and answers they definitely didn't rehearse.
Then, on Discussions and Drinks, we grab a drink, talk life, culture, current stuff.
And occasionally forget what the original topic was.
It's honest, it's funny, feels more like hanging out than listening.
So if you like real conversations, bad segues, and good laughs,
find Bacon Is My Podcast wherever you listen, and always remember to ask yourself,
what's your bacon?
Because why wouldn't you want a vacuum cleaner that also cuts your hair? That's all this basically was. It was a vacuum cleaner hose with an attachment that would just suck your hair into it so you could get a nice even cut. Much like Craftmatic, much like Life Alert, the Flowbee is still around. You can go to Flowbee.com. This first came around in the late 80s. It's attachments that you put on your vacuum, and then you turn the vacuum on and stick this thing on your kid's head to cut their hair. I'm sure nothing could go wrong there. Just looking at these commercials of these people looking in the mirror with this thing attached to sucking their hair into it, you have to laugh. But on the other hand, it is something that seems like it was necessary to be invented, like someone was sitting there thinking about it, and it actually makes some sense. Why spend all that money going to the barber shop if all you need is a vacuum with blades attached to it for your head? The neat thing about the Flowbee was that you could get it in stores. In the 90s, you could go to Caldor or Lechmere and find a Flowbee. I'm sure today you could probably find them at Walmart or Target. But if you think cutting your hair with a vacuum cleaner and blades is dangerous, try getting the Ginsu knives, because who doesn't need knives that can cut through metal?
What are 3 Ginsu knives like this worth? Don't answer, because you also get a pair of paring knives and a fruit and vegetable knife that can cut a nail and still go through pineapple like this.
These were a staple, especially of later night infomercials, like they didn't want kids to see these things. I remember these commercials, especially in the 80s, where they'd show regular knives that would get dull trying to cut a tomato and it would just smush it. Then they'd show the Ginsu knives and they would just try to dull the blade. They'd be hacking away at like pieces of wood with it, and then they'd still be able to cut through metal with it. Having a good knife set, I'm sure, is something valuable to have. Just the way they would promote it always made me laugh as a kid. Because you know that somebody bought a set of these knives and immediately went to try to cut like a soda can with it. Probably ended up in the hospital. Back in the early to mid 80s, there was just a Ginsu knife, and it was pretty affordable, $9.95. Between 1978 and 1984, there were approximately 3 million sets of Ginsu knives. I don't know if it's individuals or when they started to do the steak knives as well. The Ginsu knife had probably its most infamous moment when it was used by Lorena Bobbitt to slice off her husband's junk in 1993. That's probably not something you'd want on a new commercial for the Ginsu knife. Although I think cutting through that would be easier than cutting through a tin can. I'm sorry to all the guys listening. I'm going to move on from that because I'm already feeling the pain. Speaking of feeling the pain, make sure you don't close your foot in your George Foreman grill.
Start the new year out right. Knock out the fat for healthy meals that will be appreciated every day. Fish, chicken, steaks, even veggies, they all come out tasty. My George Foreman lean, mean, fat-reducing grilling machine. Find them in all your favorite stores from...
Sorry, that's the Office reference for those of you that don't know what that's from. This is definitely one of the most well-known and probably best-selling infomercial products. A grill that helps to drain the fat from the meats that you put in it. It was invented by a man named Michael Bohm in 1994, originally known as the Short Order Grill, until they got heavyweight champion George Foreman to promote it. With his help, the Foreman grills have sold more than 100 million units. These were the commercials that would have George Foreman talking about the grill while people were making products, and you could see the fat from burgers and steaks being collected. It was hard to not want one of these grills. George Foreman was so affable, friendly, charismatic, and you'd sit there thinking, boy, I want food that's got all the flavor but less fat. These, they come in a bunch of different models now, but they're still everywhere. I'm assuming they're at Walmart. I think I've seen them at Kohl's. Just make sure that you don't lay out bacon on your Foreman grill and then step on it when you get out of bed like Michael Scott did. If I had you out there that are around my age, 40s, 50s, have you think of the infomercials that first pop to your head, I bet this one would be one of the ones.
Just call our toll-free number now, and I'll send you the booklet, along with a full-color supplement showing before and after photos of real hair club clients. So call now for your free copy. And by the way, I'm not only the hair club president, but I'm also a client.
Hair club for men. I'm not only the president, but I'm also a client. This was at least a little more reputable than great-looking hair. Cy Sperling, he was the president, where they would show pictures of people that were bald before, and then you had the hair replacement therapy, which was more like either taking hair follicles from other parts of the body and putting them on your head, or lasers. It wasn't spray paint. This is also still around, hairclub.com, if you need it. The first infomercials for Hair Club for Men are from 1984, and if you look them up, they are very 80s looking. It would come with a booklet with their different procedures, toupees, sutures. Think about when George gets the fake hair on Seinfeld and Elaine rips it off. It's sort of like that. Hair Club for Men must have worked well for Cy Sperling because he was able to retire in 2000. It even started marketing to women in 1995. This next one, I wouldn't even have to say anything to you. I can just play you this clip and you know exactly what it is.
There's a new pet. Chia. Chia Pet, the pottery that grows. It's fun and easy. Soak your chia, spread the seeds, keep it watered, and watch it grow. And now grow a whole collection of fun with Chia teddy bears.
Just that sound. Chia Pet. These ceramic things, people, animals, where you spread the seeds on it, water it, and it grows like either a clown with hair or a sheep. Simple product, again, still around, chia.com. This is one where, like I said, playing fast and loose with the rules of what an infomercial is, because these were typically not that long, minute and a half. But I can't think about being home sick from school in the 80s and 90s and not think of this commercial. According to the information I could find, there have been more than 25 million Chia Pets sold in the United States since they came out in the late 80s, early 90s. So I may laugh at the commercial, but 25 million units sold? It's like any business would kill for those numbers. We finish off this look at daytime infomercials with another one that you probably remember from then, and it's one of those that actually had a full, half-hour segment for it.
Are you 300 calories? Stop the insanity! Diets don't work. Now, I lost 133 pounds, but I didn't go from a fat person to a thin person. That's not what happened. I went from an unfit person to a fit person, and there's not...
Yes, do you remember Stop the Insanity? Susan Powder was a fitness guru. She looked a little bit like Annie Lennox from the Eurythmics with short, cut blonde hair. It was geared towards women to reject the typical diet trends and just trend towards fitness and health and simple choices. That was the insanity, doing all the crazy diets. It was through a book that she published in 1993, and then you would get these 30-minute infomercials where she would talk about the book, give you just enough information to entice you to buy it. At its peak, which was 1994, the Stop the Insanity book and kit generated $50 million in revenue. The irony being that bucking the typical diet trends with this book was actually another diet trend. Susan Powder is still going to this day. In fact, she has a documentary about her life that just came out. You can find it on YouTube Premium, Amazon Prime. So there you go. 10 different daytime infomercial products from our heyday in the 80s and 90s. How many of these do you remember? I'm assuming almost all. Maybe that walk and roll treadmill thing. The best part is, for as many laughs as I've had doing this segment, the vast majority of these products are still available to this day. So they've got to be at least somewhat successful. This week in history, we are going back 40 years to January 23rd, 1986, and the very first induction ceremony in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I can't believe this is 40 years ago. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame Foundation was established in 1983, spearheaded by a man named Ahmet Ertegun, who was the co-founder of Atlantic Records. He, along with fellow music executives, historians, and artists, believed that rock and roll deserved the same institutional respect as jazz, classical music, and fine art. The irony here is that you were creating a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and you had these first induction ceremonies in 1986, but there wasn't even a physical Hall of Fame yet. The actual physical Rock and Roll Hall of Fame museum, which is in Cleveland, Ohio, would open in 1995, and today it's become a huge annual event, but back then it was non-televised, invitation only. The eligibility requirements for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is that the artists had to have released their first significant recordings at least 25 years earlier. Meaning in 1986, the spotlight fell squarely on the innovators of rock and roll. So on January 23rd, 1986, the first induction ceremony was held at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York City. The inaugural Rock and Roll Hall of Fame class read like a who's who of the founding generation. You had Chuck Berry, often called the single most important figure in rock history, with songs like Johnny B. Good, Roll Over Beethoven. You had James Brown, known as the Godfather of Soul, whose influence went way beyond rock into funk, R&B, hip-hop. You had Ray Charles, who blended gospel, blues, jazz, and country into a sound that broke racial and genre barriers. Elvis Presley, who was the most famous name in the inaugural class. He was the one to popularize rock and roll on a global scale. Little Richard had his wild vocals, flamboyant style, pounding piano. He had songs like Tutti Frutti, Long Tall Sally. There was Buddy Holly, who brought intelligence, songwriting craft, and studio innovation to rock music. Jerry Lee Lewis, nicknamed The Killer, with his song Great Balls of Fire, his explosive piano playing. Fats Domino, a cornerstone of the New Orleans rhythm and blues. There was Sam Cooke, who had smooth vocals and socially conscious songwriting lyrics. He helped to elevate soul music. There were the Everly Brothers, with their harmonies influencing generations of rock and folk artists like the Beatles, Simon and Garfunkel, and the Beach Boys. Bo Diddley, whose signature rhythm was often called the Bo Diddley beat. It was one of the most influential patterns in rock history. Then there was the musical influence category, where they had inductees Robert Johnson, Jimmy Yancey, and Jimmy Rogers. Then the Ahmet Ertegun Award. These inductees included Alan Freed, who was the only non-performer inductee. He was a Cleveland DJ credited with popularizing the term rock and roll. These first inductees in 1986 were so important because they established key principles for induction and for rock and roll in general. Rock's black roots were central, influence mattered more than sales, rock was bigger than just one sound, which is why to this day when you get artists that are hip-hop or country or jazz or whatever, and you say, oh, they're not rock and roll, it's not the point, it's more music in general. The 1986 inductee set a gold standard, with nearly every artist that's been inducted since being able to trace their influence directly back to that first group. I mean, you would think Elvis, James Brown, and Ray Charles, and Robert Johnson right there, they've influenced probably 95% of the people that came after them. As of today, there's somewhere around 400 members of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but that very first epic induction group went in 40 years ago this week in history. Oh, and it's time to induct another time capsule into the In My Footsteps Podcast Hall of Fame. Oh my God, could you imagine if I started doing that? Inducting segments of my podcast into a Hall of Fame? You talk about fishing for content. You'll know when you start hearing me do things like that I'm running short on content with this. But anyway, what we're going to do is we're going to stick to the same day as the first Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductions, January 23rd, 1986. What was going on in the world of pop culture back then? Well, let's find out. The number one song was That's What Friends Are For by Dionne Warwick, Stevie Wonder, and Elton John. I can distinctly remember singing this song in music class in 2nd grade, putting my arms around the shoulders of friends, singing it with them. Ah, yes, the innocence of being 8 years old. Interestingly, this song was originally recorded in 1982 by Rod Stewart for the soundtrack to the movie Night Shift. It was written by Burt Bacharach, who some of you might remember from getting a shout out in the original Austin Powers movie. The Dionne Warwick and Friends version was a charity single for AIDS research, raising more than $3 million for the cause, and winning the Grammy for Best Pop Vocal by a Duo or Group. The #1 movie was The Color Purple, and you could get into the theater with a ticket costing $3.71. This is a historical drama starring Whoopi Goldberg, Oprah Winfrey, and Danny Glover. It's a 40-year tale of the life of a woman named Cilly, living in the South, dealing with racism and abuse. The movie was a hit at the box office, making nearly $100 million on a budget of $15 million. It is 73% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes, and was nominated for 10 Academy Awards, though it did not win any. The #1 TV show was Super Bowl 20. Oh boy, my introduction into the world of sports. The New England Patriots and the Chicago Bears. The Patriots got the ever-loving crap stomped out of them, 46-10. All I remember about this game is my Aunt Susan crying at the end because our beloved Patriots just got embarrassed on national television. Later this same year, I would get to also witness the ball going through Bill Buckner's legs when the Red Sox were in the World Series. It's like wonder that I ever enjoyed sports when my introduction was the Patriots getting killed in the Super Bowl and the Red Sox creating one of the most embarrassing moments in the franchise's history. Well, if you were around back then, January 23rd, 1986, maybe you wanted to go to the Super Bowl and see the Patriots and the Bears. Well, you're in luck. The average ticket price for Super Bowl 20 is $72. When adjusted for inflation, it's $212.93. Now, take a wild guess. That is not what the average Super Bowl ticket price is now. Would you like a moment to think about it? Okay, that's enough. As of Super Bowl 59, the average ticket price for the Super Bowl was somewhere between $8,000 and $9,000. That is about 42 times more than the inflation should be. So yes, one of the biggest ripoffs on the planet is Super Bowl tickets. Just watch from home, it's way better. But that'll wrap up another This Week in History, another time capsule. What goes up must come down, all bubbles must burst. Here we go with the top 5. We're going to go back to the dot-com bubble bursting at the dawn of the 21st century and look at some companies that exploded like bubbles in the wind. The late 90s was a crazy time when it came to the development of the internet. It was also fresh and new, and it seemed like everybody wanted to get in on this as it was on the way up. All these companies came around, all these websites started making money. The problem was all this money was being poured into this new venture, and it was basically anybody that had one brain cell worth of internet knowledge could start their own company and make money, at least for a time. The party didn't last long. 2000 saw the dot-com bubble burst. Irrational investor exuberance. The Federal Reserve increasing interest rates, which made speculative stocks less attractive. And there was a global economic slowdown, which made these risky investments into these startup companies less attractive. Risk is a part of investment, but you at least want to invest in something where the risk is low. So all the money that poured in quickly poured out. What we're going to do this week is we're going to look at the top 5 companies that went under during the dot-com bubble bursting in 2000, 2001. This was a lot of research. I would say half of the ones that I've got on this list I remember. The other ones, it was a matter of researching the biggest names, or at least the biggest names at the time, that went under. As with most of these top fives, I have some honorable mentions, and the top five itself is in no particular order. Let's start it off and see how many of these companies you invested money into. So let's get on with the dot-com bubble bursting. It's supposed to symbolize the bubble bursting. It's not. So we'll start with the honorable mentions. I will give you a little bit of what the companies were about. So honorable mentions for dot-com bubble bursted companies that went under include GenX. This was one of the first internet service providers established in 1991. At its peak, its stock price was $184 a share. It was defunct in 2003. Another honorable mention is Cosmo.com. Not Cosmopolitan, but Cosmo with a K. This was a company that promised 1-hour delivery of various products, videos, magazines, food, DVDs. The company raised $250 million ahead of its launch in March 1998, and they were out of business 3 years later. Another honorable mention is Inside.com. This was a website and trade magazine covering the converging worlds of entertainment, media, music, and technology. At least that's what their slogan was. It had raised $35 million by the beginning of 2000, prompting one of the founders to say raising money for the site was easier than getting laid in 1969. They were out of business a year and a half later. Another honorable mention was Boo.com. This was a short-lived British e-commerce site launched in 1999. The company spent $135 million of venture capital within its first 18 months. It was defunct by the end of 2000, and in June 2008, CNET recognized Boo.com as one of the greatest dot-com busts in history. It went from Boo.com to Boo.com. And finally, the last honorable mention is Gadzooks, spelled with an X at the end. This company produced hardware and software for entry-level storage. In July 2000, the company went public, and their value briefly soared to $2 billion. In March 2003, they were sold for $5.3 million. So those are the honorable mentions. Do you remember any of those? All of the stories are incredible. The amount of money these companies raised or were worth, and then just so quickly gone. Well, let's keep the bubble bursting going by getting into the actual top 5, starting with one that I think all of you will remember, probably the most famous one, and that's number 1, Pets.com.
Today I'm talking to some city pets. Ooh, hey Poodles! Did you know that Pets.com delivers food, treats, and toys? Hit the buzzer. Look, I've been out here for like 10 minutes. It's easy. Come on, I see the delivery for the parakeet.
Yes, you just heard it. That's the one with the sock puppet dog interviewing people. Pets.com was a one-stop shop for pet supplies. It launched in November 1998. It had an appearance in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade in 1999, the dog puppet. The company had an advertisement during the 2000 Super Bowl. The mascot was on Good Morning America. At its peak, there's no way you could have imagined this company would just be flushed within a year. What's interesting is that this company was losing money hand over fist even at its peak. During its first fiscal year, Pets.com earned $619,000 in revenue and spent nearly $12 million in advertising. The company went under in November 2000, so basically 10 months after being featured in the Super Bowl ad, the sock puppet dog was out of business. Number 2 is etoys.com. This was an online retailer selling toys. They opened in November 1997. It was another revolutionary idea. You could shop for your kids' toys through this website. You wouldn't have to go to Toys R Us or KB. They went public at the turn of the new year in 1999, and their value quickly skyrocketed. At the end of the first day of trading, their stock went from an initial offering of $20 a share up to $76 a share. Within 2 years, in March 2001, KB Toys purchased the majority of eToys' assets for $5 million. This was shortly after the company had filed for bankruptcy. There were a bunch of different management changes, with the company actually shutting down in early 2001. Finally, in February 2009, everything eToys was purchased by Toys R Us. Number 3 is Flooz.com. That's Flooz. Stupid computer was trying to spell check it to floors.com. Flooz.com showed up in February 1999 and was most known for having famed actress Whoopi Goldberg as their spokesperson. This was an online currency program. They were trying to set it up to be similar to frequent flyer miles or old grocery store stamp books, where you could earn Flooz credits and then use them towards other products. If it sounds kind of shady, wait till you hear what happens next. In 2001, the FBI contacted Flooz.com and said that a Russian-Filipino crime syndicate used $300,000 worth of Flooz credits and a bunch of stolen credit card numbers in a money laundering scheme. It is said that in the first half of 2001, 19% of all fraudulent credit card purchases, I'm assuming in the US, came from stuff from Flooz.com. In the final nail in the coffin of the bubble bursting, when the company went under in August 2001, their bankruptcy, it was said they had 325,000 creditors. Think about that. If you have 2 or 3 credit cards and you go bankrupt, imagine having 325,000 people that say you owe them money. Yeesh. Number 4 is Webvan. Webvan was the predecessor to things like Instacart, where it would be a grocery delivery service, 30 minutes or less. It was founded in 1996, and at its peak it served 10 large metro areas, including places like San Francisco, Dallas, San Diego, LA, Chicago, Seattle. It had a good idea to it, and it was founded by Louis Borders, who founded Borders Bookstores in 1971. In November 1999, the company was valued at nearly $5 billion. In less than 2 years, in June 2001, they reported losses of $800 million, filed for bankruptcy, and shut down. And finally, number 5 on the list of the top 5 bubble-bursted companies from the dot-com bubble. So many bubbles I've said in this segment. Well, the final one, number 5, is Liquid Audio. Liquid Audio was one of the first digital music delivery services. It was right up there with Real Player. It was formed in 1996. It went public in July 1999, with its company value doubling in its first day of stock trading. Not only did the dot-com bubble bursting take out Liquid Audio, it was surpassed by Real Player and eventually Microsoft's Windows Media Player. Liquid Audio didn't go right out of business. They were purchased in 2003 by Anderson Media and continued along as Liquid Digital Media until 2011. But when you think back to the late 90s, I'm sure a lot of you that had internet access either used Liquid Audio or had heard of it. I know I went in between that and Real Player before eventually settling on Real Player, so I'm one of the ones that caused its downfall. But there you have it. Top 5 dot-com bubble burst companies. How many of those do you remember? How many did you have stock in? It's amazing because I'm sure at the time, none of these companies thought it was going to be so quickly the roller coaster would take them down. But such is what happens in the business world. Here today, gone today. Despite losing most of their cultural relevance in the last 15 years, MTV revolutionized more than just television, but the music industry. From its debut in 1981, throughout the 80s and 90s, countless musical acts were made due to their exposure on MTV. Growing up as a child of the 1980s, teenager of the 90s, I enjoyed my share of loud music. Sometimes I am surprised to this day that my hearing is as good as it is. That being said, a program came along in the late 1980s that changed my view of music and probably did for a lot of you out there that watched it, and that was MTV Unplugged. I never thought I could love a stripped-down acoustic performance of songs that used to rattle the windows of my room and of my car. It was so different from other shows at the time like 120 Minutes, Headbangers Ball, Yo MTV Raps. The core idea of MTV Unplugged was to show musicians known for electrified, high-production rock, pop, hip-hop, even R&B, performing their music in a stripped-down acoustic form. The show MTV Unplugged was created by producers Robert Small and Jim Burns as a reaction to the highly produced and heavily amplified music dominating the late 1980s. You talk about Guns N' Roses, Motley Crue, Def Leppard, Bon Jovi, Metallica. I mean, there's so many, but these producers, Small and Burns, figured by taking away the distortion pedals, synthesizers, and amplifiers, replacing them with acoustic guitars, hand-played percussion, and piano, it would do more than create a different sound. It would show the talent, the true talent these musicians had. Popular lore has it that Bon Jovi's acoustic performance at the 1989 MTV Video Music Awards was what got the ball rolling for Unplugged. That is where they did a stripped-down acoustic version of Livin' on a Prayer and Wanted Dead or Alive. The reality is the show was already being produced, and that performance actually ended up being more of a marketing piece for the new show. Little bit of trivia time here. Who was the first performer on MTV Unplugged, the very first show? The episode was taped on October 31st, 1989. If you had had me guess who the first performer was, I never would have guessed it. You ready? It was the band Squeeze. They had hit songs like Tempted, Pulling Muscles, Cool for Cats. I know a little more about Squeeze than I probably normally would because my father was a big fan of theirs. So yeah, Squeeze was the first ever band featured on MTV Unplugged. The first few episodes were hosted by Jules Shear, but after a few episodes it was realized you didn't need a host for Unplugged. You literally just had that opening with the acoustic guitar and the logo and have it basically fade in with either the crowd applauding or the band starting their first song and then just the name of the song on the bottom. Just get right into it. Strip down the show just like you strip down the music. Unplugged offered something totally different on MTV. These shows, typically an hour long, featured intimacy over spectacle, where you'd have artists in small studios with minimal sets, with a small live audience seated nearby. It valued musicianship over production, where if you tuned in, you would hear the vocals, the acoustic guitar and piano up close. Like I said, it showcased the real talent of these musicians. Unplugged also featured a cross-genre appeal. Yes, you had a lot of rock and you had a lot of grunge, which I'll get into, but you had R&B, soul, blues, hip-hop. It actually started to change my and probably a lot of other people's views on overproduced studio tracks. I got so into the unplugged versions of songs that I would be at Spinnaker Records in Hyannis on Main Street looking for the expensive European import CDs by other bands that had special acoustic versions of tracks on them, wasting $25 on a CD for one acoustic song. The 1990s was the golden era of MTV Unplugged. Pretty much all of the famous episodes happened in this decade. You had Eric Clapton's show in 1992, which ended up becoming one of the best-selling live albums of all time. This is one of the ones where you really see the talent of the musicians. Watching Eric Clapton's finger work, playing songs like Layla and Tears in Heaven, it really helped to reinvigorate his career. You had Mariah Carey, a pop star, doing Unplugged, and she did it to challenge her critics that saw her just as a studio artist. And I'm sure she didn't win over people that hated her music, but she won over a lot of critics with songs like her cover of the Jackson 5, I'll Be There. You had Bob Dylan do an Unplugged show in 1994. One of the unexpected hits for me was Jay-Z's Unplugged set in 2001. He was backed by The Roots, and to just hear him do his rap but with real music, it immediately turned me into a Jay-Z fan, at least of his music. For me, though, if you say MTV Unplugged, what's the first thing that pops to your mind? For me, it is the grunge acts. It is the Seattle domination. 3 different Unplugged shows that changed my view of music. One is Pearl Jam, one is Alice in Chains, one is Nirvana. I love Pearl Jam's show in 1992, right at the peak of their powers as a band. Doing all of the songs off of the album 10, also doing the first time I'd ever heard their song State of Love and Trust, which was on the Singles soundtrack. This is remembered for Eddie Vedder probably being told backstage not to swear in his songs. So he's doing a song Porch, which is off of 10, and instead of swearing, because there's swears in it, he takes to drawing all over his arms with a marker. So he looks like he's freaking insane, singing and gyrating with his long hair, and he's just drawing on his arms. The Alice in Chains show in 1996 is powerful but also sad, because it was a portrait of a band that was about to break up. Lane Staley's drug issues were tearing him and the rest of the band apart. The show starts with each member of the band coming out by themselves, picking up their instruments and starting to play on the song Nutshell. It's also well known for lead guitarist and singer Jerry Cantrell having a message written on his acoustic guitar that said, "Friends don't let friends get haircuts," because all of the members of Metallica were sitting in the front row, and this was when they had all gotten their hair cut short. I just remember watching the show and saying, what is on his guitar? What? And then when I read it, I'm like, I don't know what that means. And then you found out early internet days of what it meant. It is Nirvana's MTV Unplugged in New York, which first aired in October 1993. That is one of the seminal moments of my music life. I remember watching it live. If you had told me when that show was playing that just over 6 months later, Kurt Cobain would be dead and grunge music would be going, slowly down with him, I'd have never believed it. Although I guess I should have seen it coming when the set, it looked like a funeral. You had Dave Grohl playing the drums with whisks instead of drumsticks. There was a lot of covering songs by artists that influenced Nirvana, like the Meat Puppets and the Jesus Lizard, ones that I'd never heard of. And of course, there's the hauntingly appropriate cover of David Bowie's The Man Who Sold the World, which, God, it's so haunting, especially right after he died, to listen to that song. As the 90s ended, MTV Unplugged became a less frequent show. You would have sporadic specials in the 2000s, often titled MTV Unplugged 2.0. And later on, you had online episodes, streaming specials, revivals featuring more contemporary artists like BTS, 21 Pilots, and the Tony Bennett Lady Gaga special. Currently, there are more than 100 MTV Unplugged shows on the Paramount Plus streaming service. And the interesting thing is that a lot of big name artists did MTV Unplugged shows, but they didn't release albums of it. Or at least they're harder to find. Like, I can't find Pearl Jam's Unplugged set. I could find clips of it on YouTube, but it's not like Nirvana and Alice in Chains who released it, or Clapton. Paul McCartney did an Unplugged show in 1991. There's a bootleg album version of it. You had Uptown MTV Unplugged, which I don't know if there's an album version of that, but that was hip-hop acts like Jodeci, Mary J. Blige, Heavy D and the Boys. It's from 1993, and it includes Jodeci covering Stevie Wonder's song Lately, which became one of their biggest hits. But getting back to my roots of the grunge alternative, Stone Temple Pilots, Live, Soul Asylum, they all did Unplugged shows, and I don't think any of them got released, although thanks to LimeWire and Kazaa, I was able to find some of those tracks back in the day. If you've never seen MTV Unplugged, I would highly recommend first watching the Nirvana one, but then find some kind of a listing of everyone that performed, and just start picking and choosing. You could probably find them if you have Paramount Plus, or you can go on YouTube and find clips. The more I go through the list of MTV Unplugged shows, the more I'm like, oh my god, I forgot about that. Like, I forgot about 10,000 Maniacs or Kiss Unplugged. But the show Unplugged, it didn't just present concerts. It shifted how audiences and artists thought about live performance. It validated the acoustic performances as meaningful artistic expressions. I know it definitely helped me understand my favorite songs better by getting to see it not only live, but stripped down where you can really immerse yourself in the lyrics, in the mood, the message. It's another one of those that I think you had to be there in the moment to live it in the 90s with Unplugged, where you had these big-time bands with their big-time albums, and then concurrently you've got these acoustic versions of the same songs. Sometimes I feel like the loud version of Stone Temple Pilots Plush. Other times I feel like the acoustic version. Someday in the future I will do a Unplugged top 5 best shows, or most unexpected artists who have done an Unplugged show. Maybe both of those. But it shows that even decades, 30 plus years after some of these MTV Unplugged shows, that some of these are regarded as defining moments in modern music history. MTV Unplugged was definitely one of the most important music shows of my lifetime. But until next week, that is going to wrap up episode 228 of the In My Footsteps podcast. Thank you for making it to the end of your weekly dose of GenX nostalgia. I hope that it quenched your thirst for the old days. We'll be back again next week with episode 229, including looking back at disposable cameras in the 90s, the most 80s TV shows there are, which are basically shows that could have only been made in the 80s. When you watch them, they look very 80s. And we're going to look at a cartoon character that's got hundreds and hundreds of millions of views on YouTube. I couldn't believe it. We'll look at the story of the Pink Panther. So all of that and more is coming up next week on episode 229 of the In My Footsteps podcast. If you enjoy my content, and I'm figuring if you're listening now, you must at least enjoy it a little bit, you can support me by becoming a member on Patreon for $5 a month. You can also buy me a coffee. Visit my website, ChristopherSetterland.com, with links to all 10 of my books. Check in the podcast notes. I have a link to purchase a copy of the Blu-ray version of Cape Cod Cthulhu, my first acting role. At some point, it will be up on streaming platforms. I will let you know for that as well. Find me all over social media, my Facebook fan page for the podcast, Threads, Blue Sky, TikTok, read the blog, Initial Impressions 2.0. There's so much coming up in 2026. Some things I've let you know about, including my first feature film that I just finished the first draft of the script for. There could be more where that came from as I get more comfortable with script writing. But there also could be things on the horizon that I'm not even thinking about at this moment. That's the beauty of all of this. It's having so much content out there, quite literally thousands of pieces of content, whether audio, visual, writing, that you never know when the right set of eyes is going to find you. And you don't have to be some kind of content creator or a creative type person like me. It goes for any form of career or life in general. Showing up is half the battle. You just keep moving forward, create the best version of yourself, and that which you seek will find you. That is one of my biggest mottos for 2026. And I think it makes sense. If you craft yourself into the type of person you want to be, you're going to attract that stuff to you. At least that's what I tell myself when I'm having to restrict my diet to try to get back to my running shape. So keep moving forward, keep showing up. This time of year, keep warm, and lean into the things that make you happy. Favorite foods, favorite shows, favorite podcasts. I will do my best to keep pumping out content you can enjoy to distract yourself from the world, from the weather, at least for a little while. And remember, in this life, don't walk in anyone else's footsteps, create your own path, and enjoy every moment you can on this journey we call life, because you never know what tomorrow brings. Thank you all again for tuning in. This has been the In My Footsteps podcast. I am Christopher Setterlin, and you already knew that. I'll talk to you all again soon.